Joining us right now on the Rude Guest Hotline is our friend, Mr. John Keim, ESPN Commanders insider, and, of course, host of the John Keim Report. Johnny, what's up, dude? I saw you replied to the hot dog conversation.
Yes, there is no doubt. And especially if you're from Cleveland, it's stadium mustard on a hot dog. It's brown mustard. It's got some spice to it, but that is what you put on a hot dog. Period.
I remember the first time I saw that stadium mustard. I think it was with you at working a Browns game. And I was like, all right, they're really into this. I think I tried it with a pretzel. It was pretty good.
It's good with the pretzel, but yeah, because it's just like that's what you grew up having. You go to a game, you have the hot dog.
Sure.
Basically, you got the hot dog to get the stadium mustard, and it's to the point where, like, sometimes as gifts, my wife will get me, jars of the stadium mustard from Cleveland. So yes,
I love it.
And then after, like, listen, after that, it's like shout out Vienna Inn. It's the chili dog.
There you go. All right, I love it. All right. So let's get down to business. We're just about a week away from the NFL draft. Washington drafting 29th. Anybody that is telling you they know who they're going to get is full of it.
Like Chris App.
What do you think? We know they had, obviously a bunch of prospects in over the last couple of weeks. They had the big group event. What do you think is the top of their list?
Well, one thing that Dan Quinn talked about before the start of training camp last year was the ability to affect the quarterback. Do they have enough guys who can do that? And I think that has to be at the top of the list, is finding a guy who do that, whether that's an edge rusher, whether that's an interior pass rusher. Find a guy who can do that, because I don't know. So you can do that with four guys more often than not. Like they did. Their pressure rates last year were actually pretty good, but when they just rushed with four, it was way down. So like they have to find a way to do that with more of four. Beyond that, then it's the ability to take the ball away on defense. Do they have guys who can do that? So now you look at corner. There are some corners who can do that, right, in this draft. So I think those, to me, would be where you'd want to look first. I think beyond that, it clearly seems like they want to get another running back in there, whether it's as a guy to change a pace or just to upgrade, and then continue to build that offensive line.
Where do you think, when they look at the 29th pick, where would they be leaning in that part? Is it defensive side of the ball?
Well, so we're going to hear best player available, right? So like that's always what you want to say, and I do think there's merit to that, because there are some guys at 29 offensively. Like if you really like one of these running backs, like say Omari and Hampton falls to you at 29 and you love the guy, like how do you go away from that? I think though, let's say he's not there, then I think it's really hard to go away from defense with that first pick. And here's like part of the thing is too, is this is a deep running back class. So do you have to take that guy at 29? Unless, like, I was talking to a scout the other day. It was like 1 through 9 or 10. Like, there's not a huge difference in these running backs in this class as far as the quality of their play. So could you wait a little bit to get that guy? Whereas with defensive end, I think you can get into the second round with those guys and get a guy that's worth developing. Corners, you probably want to find a guy higher, right? Like there are guys they're looking at later in the draft for sure, but I think the premium spots you want to get up there earlier. So that's why I would say lean more toward defense in an ideal situation, because that's where I think the value is. And the value of running backs, you can find guys into the fourth round that I think could help you right away.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think they'd like to move out of 29.
Oh, for sure.
How realistic do you think that is? And then, there's all this talk about these other quarterbacks, the Louisville kid, Dart,
right?
Milroe. How real do you think the prospects are for somebody to move up late into the first to grab one of those guys?
I think, it's funny because last year, like guys were moving up, and when teams moved up, it wasn't for the quarterback. So let's say there's a run on offensive linemen and some team really likes like an Anthony Belton at the end of the first. Maybe they can if you don't get them there, you're not going to get them. So you've got to move up to get that guy because you need that position filled. That's also a scenario as well, right? Or maybe they could benefit by moving back 8 spots because there's a run on a position in addition to quarterback. I don't know how realistic it is because, when you talk to people, like there are a lot, I would say the common phrase would be about like teams have in that, when you hear like 15 to 16 guys with first round grades, which is a low number. So at the end of the first round, there might be different teams that feel like different guys belong there. So in other words, like I think there's depth there where maybe do you have to move up to get a guy at the end of the first, because if you sit there at 35, maybe that guy's fallen to or someone else of comparable ability, and it could be that even later in the second round, a guy of comparable ability who's going at the end of the first. So I think that complicates it. But yes, I not impossible, but I think it has to fall right for them to do it. But I definitely agree with you. Like I think in an ideal situation, they're trading back, getting another pick in that, let's say whether it's a third or fourth round, or whatever. So like if you can somehow end up with 4 picks in rounds 2 through 4, you can find 4 guys who can help you this year. And I think that would be ideal for them for sure. I just don't know yet if it's realistic. And it's, as you know, like, what if a guy's sitting there that you didn't expect at 29 that maybe you don't like, but other teams love? Like that's the scenario there. That could definitely be the case as well.
The thing I always wonder, like, is it not someone that they feel can make that big of an impact at 29 to where they don't take that chance? You move back and then somebody take the guys you want. What happens then?
Then you made a mistake. So I think, if you're going to trade back, to me, you better have a handful of guys that you like, because you have to be okay with one of them getting picked. If you're targeting one guy and you're moving back 5 spots, pick the guy at 29.
Right.
Be done with it. You know what I mean? Like, don't worry about like if it's, how maybe there were some people in the past who would be like, well, you don't want to be criticized for taking a guy too high or whatever. Take the guy where you believe in the guy. And if you think the guy, like if he's there at 29, you think, oh, well, maybe he's better early in the second or maybe like in the 30s. Is that big a difference? Take him. So if it's one guy, now if there's 4 guys you like, then it's like we have these 4 guys rated about the same. You can trade back and pick a guy that you still like and you are okay with. But if there's a guy that you really like, take the guy.
Yeah. I think we saw, though, last year when they traded out of the Cooper DeJean pick, I think that really showed how they operate, how they think, their confidence in themselves and their scouting. And I think that's a really positive sign for what may or may not happen. I think it's entirely possible if there is somebody slides to them at 29 they're not expecting, and they just send the card in and they're thrilled with it,
Yeah, for sure.
Like if they don't trade down is not a mistake, for lack of a better word.
Right. No, if there's a guy there that you really like, take him, because that's how you make your team better. And yeah, you may only end up, and you can still, like, listen, they can still trade back with their second pick and pick up another third, let's say. You know what I mean? Like they can still add picks in those rounds beyond just trading their first pick. So you can, so that's why I say, like, if there's a guy you like, don't overthink it. If you think he's going to make your team better, then take him, because I'd rather do that than taking a chance. Like, well, we love this guy, but we can pick up this 3rd round pick. No, take the guy, and then try and trade and try and accumulate more picks in a different way. So, or with a different pick, right? So, like, don't overcomplicate the process.
Totally.
Talking with our friend John Keim here. You can give him a follow at John_Keim, Keim. Check him out on Instagram, Twitter, and on YouTube. You can watch or listen to the John Keim Report, his podcast. Anywhere you get your podcast. Keim joins us via the Rude Guest Hotline. I recognize this for a lot of years. You and I've done this. You've done it. And, they're picking 8. They're picking 13. And you can really try to zero in on who makes sense there. At 29, I think it's kind of a laughable exercise to really try to guess. But at the same time, I more and more, I've been watching more and more stuff, talking to more and more people, kind of reaching out. And there's guys that I've started to really like as possibilities. Yeah. Who are some of the guys you like as possibilities?
Yeah, and first of all, it's a ridiculous exercise. Like for ESPN, we have to do our mock draft. And it's like, I have no clue who's going to be there. Like usually, even at 19, you have an idea of the guys that will be there. So you have 3 or 4 guys. Now you almost have to have like 10 guys. So like some of the guys that I really like at 29, like you can look at like Max Hairston, the corner. Like he's a guy that I think fits a lot of what they would like. I think he'll be there. I think Azaraku, the defensive end from Boston College, would be there. I think like some of the other guys that I would be intrigued by, Derek Harmon, the defensive tackle, but a pass rusher type from Oregon, Josh Connolly, offensive lineman. Like if you wanted to go that route and build a strong offensive line for years, zero issue with that, right? So I think those are some guys. And then, I think beyond there, like Travion Henderson, obviously, there's an Ohio State thing there, but he's really good and would fit what they want, right? And, Femi Oladafu, the pass rusher from UCLA, raw because he just moved to that position. I don't think you can wait till the end of the second, so you may have to trade back a little bit and get him like early, mid-second. But he's a guy that would intrigue me for sure. So, I know I'm leaving some guys out because like that, the Amos kid, the corner, is another guy that I like.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a guy? Is that going to be too high for him? But he's a guy that I like. And, the corner from Florida State, Thomas, that's another guy you throw on there. And I know there's like edge rushers I'm leaving off. I don't like James Pierce. I don't see that one.
But don't you think they have the leadership on this team to be able to take a guy like a James if he was dropped there and work with him?
I think some guys you'd have to say it has to be worth it. The juice has to be worth the squeeze.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm not like, I don't think he's the guy you're going to do that for
Pierce.
I don't know like what they're thinking with it, but just, I think you have to know, is it worth the squeeze for any player?
Yeah.
So that's.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's entirely kind of reasonable. I don't know. For all the talk.
Think about the left tackle we have right now had an issue coming out of college, and he was picked and he's still there. So
that happened on draft night, though.
Yeah, but still it happened.
But that's different from what some of the things that like maybe come out of other places. So that was, you know what I mean? So I think that's what I say. You have to, I would say this, like you have to really investigate, and it can't just be like, oh, there's some questions about him. It has to be, what are the questions? And then is the juice worth the squeeze? And I just think in some cases, I think it's best to just move on and let someone else try to squeeze that. The other, another guy is that Anthony Belton is a tackle. Is 29 going to be too high for him? I don't know. But like, he's a guy, one of those guys that maybe you like him, another team loves him because they need a tackle. Like that's how you can kind of get them into a trade. But there's a number of guys that I think are really intriguing in those rounds. Emeka Egbuka, another guy from Ohio State, terrific receiver, would help them, right? So, there's a lot that's in that round that range that is, to me, intriguing.
For sure, man. You could get a good player there, and we've gotten so caught up in only focusing on the first. I think outside of Jaden, Samerstill was probably their best rookie last year, and he was their, late second pick? You got to count on these guys to do it the right way. Did you allow yourself a moment to laugh at yesterday with the Topgolf event and compare it 1 year later?
Oh, of course, because it was comical last year. And it was comical for a lot of reasons too, JB. Like there were a lot of narratives that came out of that situation, which were laughable and just like, this is why Jaden won't want to go there, et cetera. When the reality is, and after the draft, I talked to people close to him, are like, that's when he knew they were going to take him. It's like, that's when he knew he wanted to be here. Like, he came away from this telling people, I'm Dan Quinn's guy. Right. So like there was a lazy false narrative surrounding that last year, but it was funny to listen to all and how different it is this year because, I also hope, like, it was pretty windy yesterday, so I'd be curious to see what some of the drives were like.
That was my first thought, honestly. Was like, dude, it's gusting out here. Now, Topgolf's pretty protected from the wind because you're quasi, Jeff, indoors.
The wind don't affect a perfectly hit ball, though.
What's that?
Well,
you hit a perfectly hit ball, wind don't bother it.
Yeah, I'm not sure I always know about that one.
I'm just saying.
It's going to be – what do you think happens at the top here? You think that this draft feels weird?
Very.
I can't wait to see it. I think it's Cam Ward at 1, and then I don't know what happens after that.
So, and it's funny because even with this draft, I was talking to someone who labeled this like a Baskin-Robbins draft, where it's like 31 flavors and everybody's got a different flavor they like, right?
Like hot dog toppings.
There you go. So, and by the way, there was a place in Massachusetts that had like 100 different toppings, and it was like blue cheese on there, or this thing and that thing. It was kind of unreal. But anyways, for this draft, Cam Ward, I think everybody can put their money on him going 1. I think Travis Hunter probably goes 2, it sounds like. It would be tempting if I'm Cleveland to go with having a pass rush duo of Garrett and Carter. But the more you hear, it's like that Hunter is the special guy in this draft. So they take him. And then from there, it's like the big question is, where does Sanders go? Right? Because that's like the intrigue of this draft. There's some other guys that I'm curious about, like Shamar Stewart. Where does he go? But Sanders is the headliner for the mystery. So that's the part that, who the heck knows? And it's funny because it depends who you talk to, right? I mean, sometimes you hear, I talk to someone who's like, they think he's going to slide, and other people think like top 10. So, I think that's what makes the draft intriguing is with that. And sometimes, it goes back to, if you like the guy, take the guy. Don't worry about what others say. And
100%.
where some of the other part is, we always hear about like the overdrafted stuff. Well, who's that according to? Is it, if you know what I mean? Sometimes guys are, we know that, but everybody's board is going to be set up differently. So just because like some draft nicks have it a certain way doesn't mean that it's uniform across the board. It never is. And then it's like, how does this guy fit your system and what you want to have? And so I think that's the part that'll be intriguing to see where a guy like that goes. And, especially now, like the Saints need a guy, so
right.
Maybe the Raiders. So.
Last year,
not the Raiders anymore. Yeah. So.
But think about it. Last year, everybody thought the Broncos were crazy to take Bo Nix.
Right.
A year later, everybody's like, man, the Broncos were so smart. I'd even argue with Penix because of the way Kirk, whether he was hurt or just didn't come back from that Achilles, whatever was going on. Kirk wasn't very good, and they went to Penix, and he gave him a real shot in the arm, and it looks like they got their guy.
Yeah.
Like, your organizations, and unfortunately in Washington, this was not the case for a long time, but it seems to be now. Organizations just have to be confident in their own work, and they have to not be always trying to protect their neck and like not bomb out on a season. You know what I mean? And it doesn't happen enough, but you're completely right.
Well, it's also, JP, you also have to set it up for the right guy, right? So I would look at like Jaden and Caleb Williams last year. Who had the better, all we kept hearing is like, oh, Caleb's in this great situation. Well, no, he wasn't. He was with the first-time offensive coordinator with a defensive-minded head coach who you knew would be fired if there was trouble. So, and you know what I mean? Like, these guys set it up well for Jaden Daniels would succeed wherever he went. But I think he was able to max out with that here because of how they set it up for him. And I think it just shows you, if you're a quarterback especially, you have to have the right, you've got to get the right guy. Like Daniel's ability, his love for grinding the film room and doing all that, that's what makes him special. But then you also have to have the support system around him. And I think with Caleb Williams last year, I don't know that he had that. It didn't seem like it, right? He had a couple of receivers and all that, but he didn't have that. And I think that's where I think you also, if you're Sanders, you have to hope you go to that kind of a place, because if you do, then you can max out versus don't worry about what pick you go, but worry about where you go. And, because we've seen that here in the past, you don't always have the right setup to support the guy at that position.
Realize most people don't learn that till they're a little older. They care care about where they drafted at now. When you go to a better team, you end up having a longer damn career.
Correct. Yeah. And and again, just what's the plan around them? And I think, these guys maxed out with Daniels because of how they set it up. And then again, when you have the right guy who's willing to do his part, it goes even better.
Totally. Last thing, Nick Chubb, I find kind of interesting. He is rightfully so working out, posted on Instagram. I saw it on, I think Pro Football Talk said They wrote my ending when I'm just getting started. What do you think Chubb has left, and would that be something interesting depending what happens in the draft for Washington?
Oh, man. I mean,
a lot of injuries.
And I think if you're these guys, like, I think you still need to go in the draft and just get a guy that can give you that change, right? Because that is there. Unless, like, if Chubb is going to be, no team knows him like the Browns, and not that they're a model franchise, right? But like, no team knows him like that, and he means more to that city than any other player on that team. So if there was a chance that he still had a lot to offer, I would think they would want to bring him back. Now, doesn't mean he doesn't. And, but if I'm these guys, like, if you have a chance to get a guy somewhere in this draft, like, that's where I would go. Just get a young guy in there who offers that change of pace, who is coming. It's not a question about, if they didn't have Brian Robinson, I'd look and say, like, yeah, the guy was terrific. Maybe he has something left. But I think if you bring him in, I'd still, regardless of you brought him or not, I'd still want to draft a guy, because I still think you need to find another guy. And the other thing is, like, they don't have none of their top 3 running backs are signed for next year. So you are bringing a guy that you're going to have for a few years that you can also build with Jaden Daniels. And then, but if you want to bring in Nick Chubb to bring in Camp, see what he has left, more power to him. That would find out for sure. Still draft a guy.
I agree, man. You got your top 2 backs are both good players. B-Rob and Eckler are both good players. They both missed multiple games with injuries last year.
17 games, man. It's a lot.
It's a grind, man. All right. Thank you, Johnny. Appreciate your time, man.
All right, man.
Thanks, guys.
I'll talk to you this afternoon.
Yep.
All right. That's our friend John Keim. Give him a follow at John_Keim, Keim.